Hello and welcome to the Orlando Sentinel Studios. I'm Kayla O'Brien, joined by Dr. David Cavallari from the Center, Dr. Chadwick Smith from Orlando Health, and of course Scott Maxwell from the Orlando Sentinel. Unfortunately, we're here today under very somber circumstances. Orlando is no longer the place of the United States' most deadliest shooting, that it now goes to Las Vegas during a concert. At last check, 58 people were killed, 500 plus were injured, and we're here just to talk about how we compare from June 12, 2016 to today, how far we've come. It's only been 15 months, and here we are again. So I want to kind of open up the discussion. When you woke up this morning, as most of us did, what did you feel when you saw the alerts come in, the texts? What were you guys feeling?
Honestly, I was sickened. I mean, like most people do, they wake up, they grab their phone, they look at their feed, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or some other social media, and I start seeing that prayers for people in Las Vegas. I'm thinking, what do you mean? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And then you go you do a Google search, or you go somewhere else and you see, oh my God, it's happening all over again. And for this community to wake up to that after, like you said, it's only been 15 months, is just, it's surreal.
Yeah, and we've had shootings, mass shootings since then, but nothing on this level. What did you think when you heard the news?
Kind of the same thing. I woke up, I saw, the alerts, etc., and just got a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that I haven't had for a while, but it was exactly the same as, the days after the Pulse incident.
Mm-hmm. And Scott, you kind of brought Orlando together when you wrote your first column right after Pulse. How do you feel like people in Las Vegas are going to what are they going to go through in the next few days?
Yeah, it's pretty sad that we've gotten to the point where there's almost a manual for how communities deal with these things. I looked at it this morning through the eyes of my children, as I often do. My son came down bleary-eyed around 6:30 before he turned on the TV. I felt the need to say, hey, before you turn on the TV, something bad happened, really bad. And I told him, and then he turned it on, and so there's images of the shooting, the rat-a-tat-tat, people scrambling, and he watched it for about 30 seconds, and then he turned the channel to ESPN. And I got to tell you, my first reaction was horror. Like, how can you look away from something? And then it really dawned on me like a clarion bell, this is his normal. This is what my kid and other kids have grown up used to. We've seen two mass shootings. People forget we had Fiamma just 4 months ago. There was a day when 7 corpses on the floor of a workplace would be a big deal. Right. But this is the reality that kids are growing up in, and I think it's not only their normal, but they're left to think that this is what adults have accepted as normal.
Sure, and as you said, people in Orlando have been going through this since 15 months ago. What about the people that were in the Pulse building? What could an event like today mean for them? Are they going to be having flashbacks and triggers?
Oh, they certainly could be. And it's natural for that, because a person it's only been 15 months. So for them, they're still going through anniversaries. They're still going through birthdays, through holidays, the first one, the second one. And for some people that are just starting to kind of put it into some kind of proper context and start to move forward, can find themselves back in that same place again, both emotionally and physically, where physically they may feel like they're having a panic attack, a heart attack, mm-hmm. a headache, a dizziness, and then emotionally there's fear for their lives. They feel that they're right in the middle of it again. So for some people, it's understandable for them when they wake up today and they go through the day to start feeling those things, to start thinking those things, and maybe asking themselves questions. Is there something wrong? What should I do? And part of the reason why I'm here is because the center, along with a couple of their organizations, wanted to reach out and let people know that if you're experiencing any feelings, any thoughts, to please reach out to us, because we're there to specifically help listen to those stories.
Sure.
And help them feel that whatever it is that they're experiencing, it's okay to be feeling those things. Mm-hmm. And like Scott said, in a way, it's a new normal for some of them to feel those things, which is really, it's a terrible feeling.
Yeah, I'm sure. And Dr. Smith, you actually traveled around the country kind of helping cities prepare for an attack like this?
So, yeah, there's been several of myself, my partners, and several different disciplines, from media relations to physicians to administration, have gone to several different venues from hospitals to different organizations all over the country, talking about our experience. What can we learn from the experience? And I think that's what you can do once you get through your community event, is try to help other communities prepare for theirs.
Now, obviously, no one is lucky in this situation, but was Las Vegas lucky in any way to have that trauma level 1 center very close by?
So having a level 1 trauma center in a city where something like this happens definitely saves lives. There's no doubt about it. I believe there's only level 1 trauma center in the state of Nevada for this amount of victims. Other hospitals, I guarantee, are affected by it as well. I haven't been able to watch much of the news coverage today, so I don't know how many different hospitals the patients went to, but it's going to affect their health, their whole healthcare trauma system as a whole for the next few days. And
500 injured. How does a hospital even begin to start to deal with that amount of patients?
Well, the sickest patients, within the trauma system, and all the outlying hospitals in Las Vegas or in the surrounding areas, the sickest patients are going to go to the level 1 trauma center, and then, they're going to be triaged at the scene and do it, other patients are going to go elsewhere.
So what cities that haven't gone through this or something like this yet, what can they do now to prepare in case this does happen to them?
That's pretty much been our message, since June 12th, 2016, was be prepared, because it can happen anywhere. It can happen in a small town, a big city, a tourist place, any place. And the only thing that you can do or the main thing that healthcare organizations can do is to be prepared. And it may start with just, building relationships with EMS, with law enforcement, with your fellow hospitals that may, in other situations, be competitors, etc. But to have a organizational structure in place to deal with a disaster, if you're developing that structure at the time of an event, that's too late.
Yeah, you never think it's going to be you until it is you. So I want to take a quick second and say thank you to everyone who's watching at home, and thank you to Janine Holberg, who said, I instantly thought about Orlando watching the coverage this morning and started crying. So a question to Scott. This is very similar to the Pulse situation, where a lot of people that were most likely there might not be from Las Vegas. They might have been visiting or on vacation. Is it different for people to kind of heal from a tragedy when you don't actually live in that city?
Yeah, I think the gut instant reaction is people want to wrap their mind around why something happened and then wrap their arms around the people who are the victims. This is going to be different in Las Vegas. There are going to be a lot of people who weren't there. I think when that happens, and they don't know the people intimately, a community ends up sort of wrapping their arms around each other. And I think that's what Orlando ended up doing. But there's going to be a lot of people struggling to understand why. And I got to tell you, these things get to be like Rorschach tests, where people see what they want to see. I'm going to submit that whether the motives are terror, whether they're left, whether they're right, whether they're anti-gay, as it might have been in the Pulse case, it's a nut. It's a nut, and I think trying to read too much politically into any individual one shooter's motives it can be a fool's errand. We want to try to learn. One of the other things I've learned from you guys is not just be prepared as a community, but be prepared as an individual. I think that's one thing you all have really stressed, and what that means is learn first aid, learn CPR. There could be people who were out in that field who could save lives if they were out there, but I think there are some big picture things we have to look at when it comes to weapons. There's been a lot of talk for 16 months, but that's all there's been in Florida and Orlando is about talk, and I imagine Las Vegas is going to go through some of the same things.
I'm going to say, we always say, is this the one that changes things? Is this the one? I mean, this is, again, the most deadly mass shooting in U.S. history. We just had that record broken today. Is this the time where we actually see some action?
I don't think. I'm not the first person to say, but after Sandy Hook and a bunch of children were slaughtered in their classrooms and didn't come home, if that wasn't the time to act, I don't know when that time will be. I will say that the idea of that what most Americans can wrap their arms around and support is, while there are different opinions on First Amendment rights, high-capacity magazines are something that overwhelmingly Americans think should not be on the streets. But that issue cannot get introduced or make any progress, largely because of the NRA. There were a bunch of legislators right after Pulse in the Senate and the House, with support of police, by the way, the very first responders that everybody's very tripping over themselves to praise right now. The first responders have said, I'd rather not have the kind of weapons that I face in Afghanistan, on the streets of Las Vegas or Orlando. But those efforts have not even gotten a hearing. Forget having a vote. Those haven't gotten a hearing to try to cut down on assault weapons or universal background checks.
Very interesting point.
What about mental health when you tie that into the gun debate? Because clearly this man was not well.
Right.
And the same...
Whether he was diagnosed or not, or
correct,
has paperwork for
correct.
it. Correct.
That emotionally, that psychologically, there was something wrong. And it feels like within the context of that gun control debate, that there ought to be some kind of component with the mental health piece, because it doesn't seem, because sometimes it gets tied into the conversation, and other times it doesn't. But you're right, this man was not well, and who needs that kind of a weapon?
And we get to that. You're right. That's what I was trying to say before. That no matter left or right or what the motives, this is not a well person that executes any of these things. And we often hear the need for mental health talked about, treatment. But again, that's another thing we just talk about. Florida has ranked 49th or 50th, depending on the survey. We ranked before Pulse, we ranked after Pulse, we ranked the same way right here after Las Vegas.
That's right.
It's going to have to be more than talk, and we've yet to see that manifest itself yet.
So what should people do if they're starting to have feelings about whether seeing these images on TV and they say, well, I might be having a mental health crisis? Where can they go in Florida?
Well, at least in this community, there are actually quite a few places. You have the center, which is located on North Mills.
Okay.
You have the Mental Health Association, which is downtown. You also have the Zebra Coalition. You have Aspire. You have the Hispanic Coalition over on the south side of Orange County.
And these are open to everyone.
They're open to everyone.
Okay.
And for some of them, it's regardless of ability to pay. So for some people, the concern is that, I don't have enough money. And then there's another larger concern, which is stigma, which is that if I go out, there's something wrong with me. And the truth is, for anyone who's experiencing anything from today, reach out to someone. It could be a counselor, it could be a family member, it could be a pastor or an imam or a rabbi, a friend. Talk to someone, because really one thing that I think anyone should do if they start to experience these feelings is to reach out to someone. And sometimes it's a good idea to just put the phone down for a little bit. For some people, it's just as important to take a break from it, whether it's putting on something silly like SpongeBob SquarePants, or really, and for some people it might seem completely silly, but for some people they need to find a way to unplug and to reach out and connect to another person. So we're available to provide counseling. Counseling is certainly a good option for a lot of people. It doesn't work for everyone. So it's important for people to reach out to someone, to reach out to anyone who will listen to them, because for a lot of people they feel that they're going to be a burden, but that's really not the case.
And right now people are hoping that someone reaches out to them. They're trying to help all they can. And that's a question I have for you, Dr. Smith, is there is a campaign called Stop the Bleed that you are leading, or your organization is leading. So before you have to learn CPR and the Heimlich maneuver, and now we're starting to learn how to dress wounds. Is that what the program's about?
Yeah, so Stop the Bleed is basically CPR for the current times that we live in for these penetrating injuries. And it's a push by, it was originally instigated out of the Sandy Hook shootings from a group called the Hartford Consensus. And it's a push by the American College of Surgeons to spread the knowledge of how to control bleeding. It can be done by anyone. It can be done, ideally you have a tourniquet to use to stop bleeding on an extremity, but also applying direct pressure to wounds, etc. And it's not, a layperson can do it. We teach it. We teach 2 or 3 classes a month at Orlando Health. We've taught law enforcement officers. We've taught other first responders that don't have medical training. It's free to the public, and I would, my hope is that everywhere that you see an AED in a public place, right next to it that you'll see, a stop the bleed kit with a tourniquet and dressings and gloves and that.
So I imagine with 20,000 people at this concert, those first responders cannot get to everyone immediately. You can die within minutes.
Correct.
If you bleed out.
And someone with an extremity hemorrhage, if you have someone there with a tourniquet, they could get that on there and save that person's life.
Yeah.
And that's our goal, is to decrease loss of life from these types of events, or car crashes where somebody has a penetrating wound, etc. You can make a difference. So I would say look in your local community, or look to Orlando Health. We give those classes 2 to 3 times. I've just sent an email about a class today for the next coming weeks, and it's of utmost importance.
What are some other ways we can help as people in Orlando? We want to reach out to everyone in Vegas, or even people here that are going through, the trauma of, again, reliving a mass shooting. What are some things we can do? Donating blood is good. Is that number one?
I mean, it's obviously it's not going to help the patients in Las Vegas, but it certainly helps our ongoing population in Central Florida that should they need blood, etc. And then taking a stop the bleed course, or becoming CPR certified, for that matter, to do your part as a member of the community, or just being there for if you have somebody that was affected by the Pulse event that or whatever, just checking up on them and seeing if they're okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that one of the simplest things you can do is just to check in. Say, I know that you were there, or someone who was there, whether it was at Pulse Plaza or what happened over off of Forsyth. Just to check in and say, how are you doing? You want to get a cup of coffee sometime? You want to get a bite to eat? Just to check in, let them know that they're not alone, that someone's thinking about them. Because for a lot of people, we've heard enough stories of people that have shut themselves in entirely because they just don't feel like they can reach out to anyone. So as much as you would like the other person to reach out to you, sometimes it's a matter of being proactive and at least checking in with them to see if there's anything that they might need.
Yeah, Scott, where do we go from here? I mean, we're no longer the site for the country's deadliest mass shooting. Do we, now we're just kind of going on and on with the next one? Are we looking forward? Are we looking backwards? I'm kind of a loss for words because it's so hard to talk about. We're here talking about Pulse, the anniversary, and now we're talking about a whole nother issue. Yeah,
there's a grisly tradition that we've unfortunately become part of it at this newspaper that we've learned about. When we had the Pulse shooting, we started getting kits of treats and drinks and things, and we realized, I didn't understand where they were all from, and then you'd realize one was from the Charleston newspaper, and one was from the newspaper in Aurora, Colorado, and then and one in Fort Hood, and you start realizing, good Lord, every one of these is from, and now we're going to be sending something to out there, just like we did to Dallas with the police shootings afterwards. I think the key is holding on to how the community responds, because from these darkest hours, the brightest spots emerge. I mean, when we saw the worst, we summoned our best. Mm-hmm. And we continued to do that. I talked to people at the year anniversary of Pulse who still had their Orlando United signs in their front yards. And I stopped randomly, which is a little creepy, to ask at these people, why do you still have that sign up? And they said, because I like how I felt. I liked who I was. I liked who this community was in the aftermath of that. And that's one of the things I guess I would also tell Vegas is it's going to get better. It's, you're going to respond and be stronger in a way that may be cliche, but is also incredibly true. Mm-hmm. I think we just have to sort of hold on to some of those things in between the tragedies.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the blood bank the day after Pulse, and there were thousands of people in line. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't, there was helicopters hovering around, and you can see how many people were out early in the morning trying to just do something, and the people that couldn't give blood were giving food and snacks and water, and it was just a sight to see. So I agree with you that in these tragedies some light does come through. So thank you so much for being with us on this discussion. I know it's not what you planned on this morning, most likely when you woke up, and to be here talking about another mass shooting, but this is the times we live in, and at home as well. Thank you for joining us, and if you have any further questions, please write on the comments below this video. We'll try to get them answered for you. And stay on OrlandoSentinel.com for updates on this story and many, many more. And get your papers tomorrow. Subscribe now if you'd like to get your print edition in. And thank you so much for joining me.